Our liberties we prize, and our rights we will maintain. This is Iowa Civil Rights History Podcast, where we tell stories about the contribution Iowans and the state of Iowa has made to advance the civil rights movement. Past stories are being told, present actions will be highlighted, and preparation for the future will be discussed. Here is your host, Eric Nyange.
Welcome to the Iowa Civil Rights History Podcast. Our conversation today will be on African American Museum of Iowa. In 1993, James Clark, John Brown, Marvin Steward, Thomas Levi Sr., Thomas Moore, and Bebe Davis from Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church in Cedar Rapids came up with the idea to start the African American Museum in the state of Iowa. They realized there was so much Black history in Iowa, and they wanted to preserve, exhibit, and teach the African American heritage of Iowa. Since the foundation of the museum in 1993, 4 executive directors had the pleasure to lead the museum. My guest today is number 4 on that short list. Her name is LaNisha Cassell. LaNisha is making a history of her own. She's not only the current executive director of the museum, but she's also the first and the only woman to ever hold that position in almost 30 years of the museum existence. LaNisha stepped into this role on February 1st, 2017. And it is my great pleasure to have her on the show today to talk about the past, present, and the future of the museum. LaNisha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share more about the museum and speak with you about what we do.
Now, born and raised in Washington, D.C.?
I was born in Washington, D.C., grew up in the suburbs of Maryland. Like I metroed everywhere from Maryland, D.C., Virginia.
the hub of museums, Washington, D.C.
Absolutely. It's funny because when I got here, the museum was doing blogs, like the staff would rotate up, doing blogs monthly. And when I got here, it was like my turn immediately.
Oh, really?
So I wrote about, we didn't do any more. I think that was my first one and the last one. we decided it was too much, that we couldn't handle it, that we didn't have enough resources to do that on a regular basis. But I wrote about the fact that I grew up in the DMV, and that my field trips were all like, air and space, and the Mint and the Smithsonian and all those, Robert Goddard Space Flight Center, all those places that people usually travel to come and see. I got to go and do those things on a regular basis. I didn't appreciate it. But I don't think that's an anomaly. When I got here and realized, oh my God, the Wright brothers are from here, or this is a hub of a lot of history as well, and people here didn't always appreciate it. I think you don't appreciate things, because you're used to them.
Yep.
Versus, go to a new place and you're like, wow, they have all those things. So it was really just kind of an understanding of, and developing an appreciation for things. So I wrote about my experience coming from a big city and the experience of being in a cultural mecca, if you will, and then coming to Cedar Rapids, which honestly, we have 5 museums. We have a city our size, 5 museums. That's kind of not really the norm, I don't think.
Oh, I did not know
So we
that.
have a lot of cultural, we have the Czech Museum, our museum, Bruce Moore, the History Center, the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art. And then you look at, we have like the Paramount and Orchestra Iowa and Theater Cedar Rapids. We have the Indian Creek Nature Center. We have a lot of different arts and culture. We've grafted in nature. We have all these things right here in Cedar Rapids. It's kind of amazing.
Oh, wow. So what brought you to Iowa? That's a long way from home.
So my husband grew up here.
Okay.
So, after he graduated from Iowa State, he moved to join his older brother who had left here and went to Baltimore. And then we ended up meeting in New York. Long story.
Okay.
we met in New York at a Christian camp. And then we got engaged, and he had an opportunity to come back to Cedar Rapids for a job. And so we moved up our wedding date, got married, moved to Iowa. And it has been 17 and a half years.
On behalf of Iowans, we're glad you're here.
Thank you very much. You know what? It's been a great time. I just learned so much and been able to really just go all in and be a part of the community and really be able to learn and to contribute to it. It's been a blessing.
I was thinking about which direction to go with our conversation today. I think it was maybe this past summer, I ran into somebody at James Jordan House in West Des Moines, the Underground Railroad guy. And that lady, born and raised in Iowa, she had no idea that Iowa has the African American Museum.
You know what? That's not an uncommon response to people learning that we're here. I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that we're physically located in Cedar Rapids. Because of our physical location, it did limit visibility and awareness. Just having the museum here and being able to share rich culture of African Americans in Iowa was enough to do it in Cedar Rapids, even though our name says of Iowa. But I thought I really, really wanted to try my best to expand our reach and awareness, because not only is it going to bring people in the doors, but it's going to be able to educate more people across the state about the African American contribution and struggle here in the state. So it's not uncommon that we hear that, but you know what? When we hear that from people who are walking through the doors, we say, well, today is not too late. So come on in.
True.
And we've done marketing efforts, particularly over the last couple of years, to really get across the state, like billboards we've had in across the state. Actually, there are a lot of them up now. We have billboards in Davenport, Des Moines, I think Dubuque, right here in Cedar Rapids, of course, and then some other communities across the state. We really want to try to improve visibility so that people know we're here.
What do you see in terms of age bracket, like the people that are more interested in coming to the museum? Do you see more older people, more younger people? Is this the mix of both?
I think there's been evolution. The thing that has remained the same, of course, school field trips. School-age children come regularly, more, of course, before the pandemic, but we're starting to see an increase in that now, too. But I think traditionally we've seen more people who are probably 65 and above. But over the last few years, I've definitely seen an increase in a variety of age ranges, from college students to young professionals to, retirement age. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that the people who do know we're here have an expectation, and they know that what we do and what we're all about. But I think for the new audiences, we've kind of changed our focus, or kind of evolved our focus over the last few years to be a little bit more real-time relevant. I think all of our content has been relevant over the years, but over the last few years, you think about Driven by Hope, which talked about immigration and migration to Iowa, or Untangling Roots, the culture of Black hair, and the definition of beauty standards in our culture, and then Unwavering, modern protest, and then our current exhibit on redlining. So I think that changed the scope of our audience reach.
The museum was founded in 1993.
Yes.
What was the reason behind it?
There were a group of congregants at Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church who recognized the fact that there was a rich culture of African American contribution in Iowa, and really wanted to showcase that. So they convened, got the nonprofit status, and had established a museum at different locations in Cedar Rapids before opening the museum, where at its current location. But there's so much rich history, and every day we're learning more. Even today, people actually call us and wonder why we don't have something about this person or that person. And we're like, even though we're the African American Museum of Iowa, we don't know everything that's happened in the state, and we learn new stuff every single day. So that's one of the things that's exciting about us. We'll never really have reason to close our doors, because there's always new information to be able to learn and to highlight for our patrons and our audience across the state. And I think not just because there's history to be shared, but because there was a concern that this content is not being taught in its traditional systems. And so having that information, that content that is not being highlighted and shared and educating our youth was important. We don't want that history to fade away or to become lost because it wasn't being shared. So that was another reason, was because we know that content is not being shared.
Yeah. How important do you think that is?
It's important for all people. I don't think it's just something for Black people. But in terms of the Black community, the sense of pride, knowing about your roots, your ancestry, obviously there's a lot of content that is hard to handle, the struggle, atrocities, the injustices. There are so many things that have happened that, we have pride in. The people who were activists and who did stand up and stand firm. And so I think it's important for us in our history, and for people who aren't of color, people who aren't Black or African American, knowing the history that we've come from, I think helps to understand where things are today and to have those conversations. We really focus on engagement, conversation, and reflection. Those are the things we want people to do when they come here, when they go through our exhibits, go through our programs and presentations, and be able to, and then go home and digest it all and think about it, reflect about it.
Like I mentioned, since the foundation of the museum, there has been 4 executive directors. But you, the first and the only woman to ever hold that position in the last 29 years. Talk to me.
Yeah.
Does that ever sink in
Well,
you
it's
or not?
interesting. I never, you know what? I think because it's an African American museum, I think that the fact that it's Black leadership has kind of been my thought. I haven't really thought about the first female, but I do think it is it's certainly, something I take seriously in terms of being a role model. Sometimes you don't even think about that.
Yeah.
That's not, your intention to go into something in life is to be a role model. But I
Mm-hmm.
think all of us are, whether or not it's negative or positive. And I have an opportunity to be able to show little Black girls and other girls and women of color that we too can be leaders in our community.
Absolutely. Is there any challenges that you faced in that position as being a woman, or is just the same challenges every other executive director is facing?
I wouldn't say this specific to being the leader of the museum. I would say that I think that there's an expectation. I think that the leadership at an ethnic museum or an ethnic organization is based on that, is that there's an expectation that I be here. In terms of being a woman in at the table in many conversations, whether that be nonprofit organizations, other museums, I do think that it is challenging at times because this is still a male-driven industry. I do see other directors who are females, but I would say even here in Cedar Rapids, most of the directors are male, with the exception of the Czech Museum is also has a female leader. But again, I feel like I've been received very well in most situations.
What do you think is the role of museum in general in pushing the civil rights movement forward?
I think the role of the museum is to raise awareness. It sounds cliche, but it's really awareness about the fact that there is African American heritage and culture and history here in Iowa. Eventually I'd love, we shouldn't have a separate history, right? It should be inclusive. It should talk simultaneously because it all happened at the same time. But I think because everything's been kind of, for lack of a better word, segregated, taught separate. So I remember my daughter coming home telling me about Amelia Earhart, but she didn't know who Bessie Coleman was. But most people don't, unless they educate themselves. I didn't learn a lot about Black history until I was in college. But I think the importance of the museum is to raise that awareness and to be able to teach people, to give people a place to, or a platform for their voices to be heard. We've really, started to do more collaborative things and with other organizations and convene presentations and meetings and sessions where people are able to have those platforms. And so I think that's really important. And we really find that people connect with the authentic stories that we share about Black Iowans across the entire state. I've seen so many instances of people coming in and connecting, Black and white or other, with the content, with the people. I remember seeing a young lady come in, I think she was college age, and I saw her come back out of the exhibit and go into the lobby, and somebody looked like they were consoling her, but I don't know if it was consoling, but she was, she was very weepy, but her grandmother had been featured in the exhibit, and she didn't know that.
Oh, wow.
And so it was just amazing to see that. And I've seen that happen on multiple occasions. I've even seen people come in specifically because they knew that their family member was featured to come and see. And so I love being here when that happens. I think it's great. I love when people come in, particularly people of color, who come in and connect with their ancestors and the history that they did not know about.
What do you think are the most important things to teach people about Black history, especially in Iowa, for people who has no idea?
I think there's some foundational things, and I don't think it's just limited to Iowa. I think that our history usually at school starts with, our history starts with slavery, and that is not the case. I think an understanding that Black history or African history didn't start with slavery. We come from kings and queens, so I think that's important. I do think it's important for us to acknowledge the people who were leaders in our community, whether or not that's, pre-slavery and of course, American history as well. I think that there's so much lost history, and a lot of that was on purpose. There's been this big movement to showcase some of the big things that have been left out of history. There's so many, but I will just say, because I think people are more aware now, but I think there becomes this like aha moment when it's like, oh, okay, now maybe I can start to say, you know what, I have to unlearn or reteach myself what I have learned and understand that everything wasn't included or things were left out on purpose. And I think that starts to change the way you think about things, how you see things. So I think there's just some foundational things that if we understood things from a foundational perspective, then I think that would give us a greater understanding of where we are today and allow people to have the ability to rewrite how they think and to have a new appreciation for African American people, our story, our history, start to see it as for what it was. It was intentionally left out.
Now, do you think that's where the disconnect comes in? That the black kids, they get taught this history about their country, and white kids, they get taught this history about their country?
I think so.
It's
I
two
think
different types of
obviously
history.
we learn a lot at home, right? We learn a lot at home. So I think that whole idea that we're not born hating people. We're taught it, or we're not born with the wrong information. We're told it. So I think that re-educating, and I don't even blame teachers. Sometimes they're teaching what they've been taught.
Yep.
Right. If the books don't say it, they're going to teach what the books say.
Mm-hmm.
So, but there's this idea that there are people I've talked to who are historians who will not change their mind when they learn new stuff. Nope, this is history. This is how I learned it. I don't believe that it's wrong. That's the struggle right there. We talked earlier about when you learn new information, it kind of changes your perception. Now it's like, what else did I get wrong? But if you're unwilling to even acknowledge that it could have been wrong,
mm-hmm. And that's dangerous. That's very dangerous.
It is.
Do you think we're going to get to the point in this country that we don't see color, or we get to the point like we see each other as just human beings? Or do you think that's part of human nature?
I think it's part of human nature for us to see color. I don't think we'll ever not see color. And I think that's okay, because I think when people say you don't see color, that means you don't see culture. You don't see all of the unique things that we each individually bring to relationships and society and everything that we do, whether that is serving on a board or being a part of a team of an organization, part of a family, whatever the case, a church, whatever the case may be. So I don't think that the goal should be that we don't see color. I think that it's really just being able to embrace our differences, right?
Okay.
I think that'll be something that we deal with through the rest of time, at least for the foreseeable future. But I can envision a time when there will be more embracing of cultural differences and ethnicities. Honestly, I do see that, but it'll be a long time, and it won't happen without intentional effort on all parts.
Black history is American history. How should we celebrate it year around instead of just February?
No, I think just we can educate ourselves about all history all the time, whether or not it's reading books, watching documentaries, visiting the museum, of course, and learning about the stories that we share here from about Iowans across the entire state. So I think that we just have to be more intentional about learning. We don't have to just do it in February or in January, but year round, every day.
What is your opinion on Black History Month?
Well, I think it's important. The inspiration was, and the motivation to develop Black History Week first and then Black History Month was because the information, the education wasn't being provided. And I think, though, but it was one of those, double-edged sword things where, now we're, it almost feels like you're locked in. But that's okay, because we're here to say, not just February. Our content is available all year long. And, we try to make sure that people know that. When people call and say, hey, I need to have a program and it has to be in February. I'm like, well, we're open all year long. How about April? How about June?
Yeah.
So I don't think that, I think that having Black History Month certainly is something that is needed. And I think that it expands people's understanding of the contributions and the struggles of African-American people in our country. But I don't think that people should limit their learning and understanding and education to
just 1 month. What are some of the challenges have you faced in running museum in general?
I would say probably fundraising. There's 5 museums in Cedar Rapids, and then you think about other nonprofits, and we're all kind of vying for the same fundraising dollars. I think what helps to stand us apart in that we have other opportunities is that we are statewide, so we have opportunities outside of Cedar Rapids to fundraise. But I think fundraising is probably one of the largest challenges, finding new resources, continuing to be relevant to the donors, and, making sure that we are at the table when those conversations are held and when those decisions are being made about where money is going to be going in the community.
In the state of Iowa, does that bring another layer of challenge because of your running a Black museum in a mostly white state?
Actually, because of the fact that we are the only organization like ours in the state, that does open up some opportunities. There's a lot of box checking that has to be done. DEI is very relevant right now. so people are really focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, either in their strategic plan or their new vision. Some organizations have had it a long time, and some of them have just started to incorporate that as an initiative. And so we help to give organizations resources that they have included now in their vision or in their strategic plan. And so whether or not that's having their employees come and engage with us and, visit the museum, partnering with us for a program or a presentation, or just, coming to a workshop and learning more. So, we've been able to really leverage our uniqueness with some of the opportunities that we find here in Cedar Rapids and across the state.
With everything that has been going on in the last, couple of years in the Black community, do you think that kind of renewed the interest in Black history or in the Black culture in general?
I think so. I think that, obviously the murder of George Floyd was not something that was new to our community. It was that it was recorded and that people got a chance to see something that has been talked about and experienced for a long time. But because people were able to actually see something like this happen, it really caused a lot of people to pause and to question what they thought was one thing and realizing is another, and caused them to want to figure out what they could do to think differently, to understand better, to make different choices and different decisions. And so we've been really called upon to be that resource in the community, whether or not it's providing foundational history. How did we get here? In order for us to know how we got here, we have to know what happened in the past. And a lot of people kind of are ignorant to some of the past and some of the history that has been not provided in traditional educational settings like a classroom. And so I think that because of what happened in 2020, it definitely shined a light on us. We've been here for almost 30 years, but people are suddenly realizing, okay, we have this resource here. I better start using it. Or what do they do? What are their resources?
Yeah.
So we have gotten a lot of attention because of that national effort. Brought a lot of attention to what we do.
Why do you think there's a lot of Black history is not being taught in the classroom, or the ones that is being taught is kind of watered down a little bit?
It's interesting because I think a lot of us, when we think about the history that we don't know, we think about only the fact that we don't know it. And I believe, obviously, that it's not just Black people who weren't taught Black history. Mm-hmm. White people weren't taught Black history either. So as they're learning new things, a lot of us were taught by our parents and our grandparents and by experience. So as we know, we do probably know a lot more than our white counterparts. They're suddenly thrust into this situation where it's like, oh, wait a minute, how did this happen? I didn't know it. So people start to having their eyes awakened to not just the fact that they don't know history, but the fact that it was suppressed. And so when you think about that, it's so dynamic and so complex. There's no one conversation that's going to encapture everything. There's so many different conversations, so many different perspectives, and so many different ways to be able to educate people about the history that has been suppressed, not provided in our educational settings. And so it's amazing, but there has been a renewed interest. People are calling us and visiting with us and reaching out to get to our resources. I mentioned that our traveling exhibits usually get reserved, months ahead of time, and that was definitely the case for this year too. We were getting requests from, back in September for February. We had all of our exhibits have been reserved for January and February since the end of last year.
Oh, wow.
There's nothing available until March. And so, that's a good thing. But it also shows that people are kind of hungry and thirsty for this knowledge, and they want to be able to educate it. And maybe they don't have the resources on their own, but so they need what we have to be able to help them teach. And that goes for our traveling trunks, which go out to many homeschool parents. So even parents are taking the initiative and not waiting on the schools. And the libraries have our resources. And the traveling exhibits, like I said, we have about 20 different, there's about 10 different that have duplicate copies of our traveling exhibits to go over, not just in Iowa. They are in other places outside of the state, too, which is kind of amazing.
Do you think the resistance on the 1619 Project book, do you think the resistance from that is because people just want to stay to the history that they've been told all their life and they don't want to believe anything else?
I think there's a combination of things, but I definitely think the major piece is when you have believed one thing or a narrative for your entire life, and you start to, if something makes you change your mind about one thing, then, you have to consider this going to make you change your mind about a lot of other things. And so I think that's the reservation. It may not even be a conscious thought, but if I've all my life have believed that Black people were inferior, because of whatever I've been taught. And suddenly you're like, wait a minute. Now you're challenging every belief I had about everything. Mm-hmm. And so that's hard for people. That's hard for people to wrap their minds around the fact that if I was lied to about one thing, my whole narrative is a lie.
Yeah.
And so that resistance, I think, is because it's going to really shake you up. And what about the people who told me those things? It wasn't just my teachers, but my parents, my grandparents, all those things. So I think that it's a big issue. It's not just, that one thing. So there's a lot of reasons why people are in fear of certain things. And then there's people who just, are hateful and who just don't want to, want truth to come out.
Yeah, there's part of that too. Let's get to the museum. There's some pieces in the museum there I love, and I kind of want to pick your brain on it. I want to start with the Makers. Is it Makers Gala?
Oh, the History Makers Gala. Yep.
Yeah, History Makers Gala. Explain to the people what that is all about, and how can somebody be part of that? How can somebody's name be on it?
Yeah, we've had the fundraiser for a number of years. It used to be a women's conference long before I arrived at the museum. And so it recognized a lot of educators, I believe. And more recently, over the last, 10 years or so, it's been what it is right now, where we honor 4 or 5 people across the state of Iowa who have made an impact in their community. So, we talk about trailblazers, legacy makers, people who have done something that is above and beyond, their profession, or maybe it's in their profession, but it's still outside of what their day-to-day routine might be, or something they've done in the community that's really impacted the people, whether or not it's youth or elderly or, civil rights, any human rights, anything like that. And so every year we have a nominations process, and then we have our event, usually in the fall. And it also serves as our annual meeting where we get to tell the audience about what we've done over the last year, what strides we've made, and what we are planning for the future. And then we also honor those 4 or 5 individuals with an award, and they get a chance to come up and make remarks. And the last couple of years has been at the Hotel Kirkwood Center. We've had consistently about 400 people over the last few years, even when we did virtual. And this first year back in person, we had about almost 400 people registered in person.
Oh, wow.
And it's a great way for people in the community who recognize these things, who see other people doing things in the community. So it's an individual who modifies the course of history. They impart knowledge, impact communities in which they live, and just through their influence, they've changed history. So we talk about trailblazers, change agents, legacy maker, and role model. So those type of characteristics. And then you're able to submit their information. You can include a letter recommending why you think they should be a history maker. And if they've been in the news, you can attach articles, you can attach links and everything. And so that's available on our Facebook page. And if somebody were to reach out to us, we could send a link as well.
Oral history videos on your website.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we really love that we are able to showcase our oral histories on the website. I think that's when we did our revamp of our website, we added the oral histories. We have those inside the exhibit. When we go into our permanent exhibit, we have oral histories, and we have a ton of them in our archive, which some of them still need to be edited so they can be viewed. And we had projects with students where students led interviews of individuals in the community. Basically, it's us going out and making sure we capture the stories of some people, African American people across the state, to make sure their stories live on. Because if you go into our gallery, into our oral history nook, we call it a nook, because you can sit down and listen to the videos. Several of the people on the ones that we have currently were alive when we opened the nook, or the oral history nook, and have now since passed away. So, we know it's very important, and that we capture some of these stories while people are still living, so those stories can be shared from generation to generation.
That's very true, because you have 2 of the twin sister, Ruth and Ruby Page Haddix. They were born in Manly, Iowa, and lived in Mason City, I think, almost all their lives. So that was interesting for me to watch.
Oh, yeah, that's the sisters. Yeah. I'm always fascinated by the stories. There's so many you don't know, and then I'm like, I wish I had gotten to meet some of these people. And I've been very fortunate that I have been able to meet a lot of people that we have histories on.
Oh, that's good. You have a celebration hall room there called Aldine Davis.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it. Who was she?
Yeah, so Aldine Davis Celebration Hall is the name of our community room, and that's the space that we hold our own programs in, and also space where we rent out too. So it's a source of revenue for the museum. And I will tell you that the donor who made the contribution to the museum wanted the hall to be named after Aldine Davis. It was not her or her family, but somebody else in the community who recognized what she had done in her community and wanted it to be named after her. And so she was in Centerville and grew up in Muscatine. And she was very active in her church and the NAACP and a number of other nonprofit organizations. I believe she was involved with her Rotary Club, the library. She also was appointed by the governor, then Governor Terry Branstad, to serve on the Governor's Commission on Aging. So she was someone who supported elder rights and care. So she was, I think she lived to be into her 80s, and she passed away back in 2000.
Oh, wow.
And so she was just a pillar of the community. This was definitely someone who we would consider a history maker.
Yeah, because I know she played a huge part in Muscatine on getting the name of Alexander Clark out to the community as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We're recording this in January. You were working on something on Iowa Black Panther for this month.
Oh, yeah. So typically quarterly we change our lobby case. So basically it's a case that sits in our lobby. Sometimes it could be two, depending on the amount of content we might have. And our curator takes the lead on doing research and deciding on a topic to cover. And sometimes interns, she may delegate it to an intern. And so the current lobby case is about the Black Panthers. And in particular, it talks about the Des Moines chapter of the Black Panther Party.
I did not know anything about. I need to dig into that a little bit more. When I'm thinking about Black Panther, I'm not thinking about Iowa at all.
I know, right? I think that's what's exciting about being here, and about being a part of this whole institution as a person who works for the organization, but also in the community and across the state. There's so much. Every day I learn something new.
Yeah.
Literally, I'm not even exaggerating. Every day I learn about somebody new or learn something more about a person that maybe I'd heard of but didn't know that much about their story. I think that's why it's so important. And also, when we do cover topics like this, we don't have a lot of material about the Black Panther Party. I think we got some new things, and you'll see it in our newsletter that comes out later, probably the next week, where we talk about how we receive items for our collection. People make donations of collection items. And some of the materials that we received to showcase the Black Panther Party was because of a recent donation of things they had, found in a box, or somebody in the family or a relative may have, passed on to them. And that gives us the material to be able to review and to add to our archive and be able to share with the community.
Yeah, I'm going to reach out to you off air to talk about that piece because I'm super interested about that Black Panther. Talk about the permanent and temporary exhibits and what do they mean?
Our permanent exhibit has been on exhibit since we reopened after the flood. We had a permanent exhibit before that. This one is called Endless Possibilities. When you get into Iowa, it takes you through Underground Railroad locations across the state, and you get a lot of background information about specific folks in Iowa who made an impact or whose stories need to be shared. And then our temporary exhibit changes every year. It's up for about 11 months, and then we spend about a month de-installing the old one and installing the new one. We spend a lot of time as a staff and the community developing exhibit topics. We keep a running list of exhibit topics that we internally think are ones that need to be shared, and then we also, like I said, we've been, over the last couple of years, been surveying the community as well, and we look around nationally what's going on. As a matter of fact, last year's exhibit on unwavering 21st century activism, we had been planning for the last 2 years. It was very, very, I don't even know what the right word is, but the fact that exhibit was opening months before George Floyd was murdered, we had no idea that would happen and that it would happen like that. Oh. So the exhibit it took on even more relevance and importance when it opened. And we were able to, at the last minute, include some of the local protest events and things like that happened in the exhibit. So when people would come through, there were people who saw themselves on a mural. They were like, oh, I was at that protest. And so that was, even though we would never have planned something like that, but it happened that way. And so we've been really trying to be relevant with those, and all of the content is relevant. But right now, what's happening right now. So as we look at, redlining is such a huge component of even where we are right now. People who are not aware of redlining, or they may think, oh, that happened back then, not realizing the impact of redlining on today's communities.
Explain what redline is, because I know I saw that on your website that you guys are working on something.
Sure. In a nutshell, it's the systemic denial of services to certain people groups, to people of color. And even though initially that was something that was primarily looked at in the housing and mortgage lending, arena, the ripple effect of it has impacted everything from school resources throughout the entire community. When you start dictating where people live, and then all resources get poured into certain communities and not in other communities based on the race or ethnicity of a group of people. We have murals of some of the redlining maps from some of the communities. We talk about 7 different communities, including Cedar Rapids, in the exhibit, and some of the murals some of the maps we've blown up so you can really see in the key, desirable, undesirable, things like that. That's how it was coded. I will tell you that there's been a lot of banks, employees, staff who have made a point to come through this exhibit. I think because some people were either not aware or became aware or knew about it and were like, you know what, wow, we need to educate ourselves and see what was going on and see what happened.
What's some of the likes and dislikes of your job, the stuff like still get you up in the morning?
One of the things I think has been a cool thing is I don't have a museum background. And I think that's not necessarily uncommon for a museum leader because, we have an educator or education team, and we have curator and collection team. And so the director's role or job is to do the fundraising and be the manager of the people and be the face of the organization. And so I think that those are things that I actually enjoy. I enjoy working with the team. I enjoy leading the organization. Some of the things that I've had to, do, I knew I would have to, is to learn more about museums, not just history, but also operational. What does it mean to run an organization, a museum? I mean, whether or not it's preservation, conservation, exhibition, all of the things that, that I had no background on. And so there's a learning curve, and it's been a fun, exciting type of learning that I didn't expect. And so some of the things I really love about the job is just working with the team, being a part of the creative process. What exhibits are we going to be doing? How do we engage the community? Things I dislike include HR. I do not enjoy, payroll and, all the other, things that have to do with human resources. Love the humans, but not the administrative part of that.
Why did you want to be the director of this museum?
That is a good question. When I was working as the executive director of the Marion School Foundation for 11 years, when the position at the museum had opened up. Honestly, I don't know that I had thought about, what will it mean to be at this African American museum, and what will it be in terms of the community and, my own personal views on Black history or how we presented, any of those things.
Yeah.
At that time, my children were at an age, because I was working part-time for those 11 years at the school foundation. It was time for something new, something different. My kids were at an age where I could do a full-time, because it's a full-time position kind of thing. And so that was kind of more my thinking about it when I was contemplating the position. It wasn't until I was actually here that it hit me, wow, this is huge. Not in terms of my role in the community, but what this museum is responsible for, the challenge and the expectation, of what we had to be able to provide the community, what we can provide the community, and what was expected of us. So that didn't really, I don't think that was something that I really truly had an understanding of before I got here, because it's been a learning experience even now as I'm coming up on 6 years. Wow, every day I'm learning more and more about our contribution, our struggle, what we have and what we do. Many people come in here and they don't know that they for whatever reason, they think that we're really only for Black people. Do you ask that question when you go to the Czech Museum? Does everybody check?
Yeah.
When they go there, I don't know that happens. And maybe there's just this awkwardness of, is this for me?
Mm-hmm.
And, obviously we're open to we want all Iowans to understand this history, because it's a shared history.
What are some of the things that are coming up beside the things that you mentioned that you are excited about and you think is going to make some impact, especially in education side of it?
Well, there's a couple things. So our next exhibit, I think I mentioned to you, after the redlining exhibit closes in August, we will have our next exhibit on school to prison pipeline, working title. We don't have a title yet. We are going to be doing some renovations. Not really ready to announce any big details yet, but the flood wall is coming through our parking lot. The flood control system that Cedar Rapids is developing across the city, we will be impacted by that. So we're working with the city to mitigate the impact, but we're excited about embracing the project because it's going to be something that will allow us to kind of rebrand, and that's part of why we pushed to do our new logo. We've been wanting to do that for a while, And so we pushed that new logo at the end of last year. And that kind of pushed us into this new phase that we're going into, where we're going to be doing some rebranding, and we're going to bring back our guided tours and presentations. We'll offer in-person presentations as well as virtual presentations. We'll go off-site to do in-person presentations, all those things. So a lot of good things happening. We will keep up with our website and our social media platforms, make sure people know what we're doing. I think there's some past events that we've done recently that are still available for people to be able to check out, too. Local choreographer and University of Iowa Associate Professor LD Kidd did a really fantastic performance that was pre-recorded. It's on YouTube. He was inspired by a redlining exhibit and he called his project They Drew a Line, and it's really powerful. And that's available on YouTube. We've had a lot of performances. We had a gospel performance, and we also had like a trumpet. I think it was a trio. It was a jazz trio doing with the trumpet and some other instrumental performance. That was really cool too. So we have a lot of things that are still out there and available. Some children's programs that were recorded and still out there and available on YouTube and on our social media platforms to be able to still view.
Good deal. Now, I know you got to run. This is the last question I want to close out with. And I asked this question to quite a few black folks, and the answer's always been the same about what the view Dr. King and Malcolm X will have when they wake up today and see the state of black America today. And everybody say the same thing. They'll probably be disappointed. Why you think that is?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because when I think about that, I sometimes think of the question being posed as if they had lived and to see where we are right now, because it would be different, because I think that we wouldn't be where we are right now if they had lived.
Yes.
But I think if they just suddenly woke up in 2022, I think that they would agree that there's things that need to be done. I don't think they would be pleased. A lot of people paint that narrative that look at how much progress has been made. Well, I think that they would, they might concede that there's been some progress, but I don't believe that they would be proud the way a lot of people believe that they would be happy that, look at how far we've come. I think that they would see the negatives and really call for leaders in our community to stand.
Why do you
I think that's some of the things we lack that during their generation, they were the strong leaders, and we don't necessarily have the Malcolms and the Martins that we used to have.
But
we have some, I think. I don't want to discredit anybody, but
but and the way I'm looking at this, though, for me, when we're talking about leaders, I'm speaking with one right now.
Oh, thank you.
That's the way I'm always looking at it. I almost feel like we have a lot of leaders now. Maybe the impact is not as big as what Dr. King and Malcolm X had.
Yeah, I think so. I think our attention is divided so much as well. When they lived, we had TV and radio. Now we have, how many kids do you see that are not face down in their iPads and iPods and whatever other devices they are in a game, living in the metaverse and all those things. And so we have so many distractions that keep us from some of the important things that it's easy to, even if we do have leaders who may take stands, everybody's not paying attention.
Yeah. But we have another curse, the too much information as well.
It's so much. And, and it's exciting. I think those people who are sponges, who love to learn more about history, that's great. But everybody isn't like that. And we have to, I think that's one of the reasons why we do have patronage, is because we are providing those, even people who may not have a deep-seated interest in learning more, we're still providing them with a mechanism for being able to learn. And maybe it's not traditional. Maybe in front of sitting in your classroom at a desk while your teacher lectures you is not the way you're going to learn. But maybe coming in and being able to walk through and touch things and read things and watch videos and at your own pace, is what people, that can help some people be able to really absorb it a little bit better.
Well, anything, where can people find out more about the museum? Anything you want to plug in?
Absolutely. People can find more about us at blackiowa.org or on social media. Generally, it's African American Museum of Iowa.
LaNisha, thank you very much for the gift of your time.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
All right, man. That was LaNisha Cassell, the Executive Director of African American Museum of Iowa in Cedar Rapids. Thank you for listening to the Iowa Civil Rights History Podcast. Until next time, peace.